Hi, Homeworthy. I am Nasozi Kakembo. Welcome to my home in Maryland. Come on in. I cannot wait to show you around today.
You're watching Homeworthy, where we believe every home has a story.
Hi, my name is Nasozi Kakembo. I am an author and creative director of XN Studio, a home decor brand that partners with artisans throughout Africa to create ethically sourced and meaningful home decor goods. We are at my home in Silver Spring, Maryland, just outside of Washington, D.C. I actually grew up around the corner from this rental home, and I never anticipated or planned on being back in this area. But as life would have it, my son got into a really great high school program close by, so we packed our home, packed our bags, and moved about 10 minutes away from his high school. And so because I knew at the time that this was going to be like a 2 to 3, maybe 4-year home, depending on what we decided to do once he got his driver's license, around the age of 16, which is knocking on our doorstep now. I wanted a home that felt good because home is my profession and my vocation, but I didn't know really how to invest in a temporary space, making it feel my own without spending too much money. So that was the welcome challenge that I had when finding this home. And really, I feel like I can convert almost any space aesthetically into something that works for me and my family. But having a layout that works for us is something that I really prioritize and value even over the aesthetics of a home. You can always change the aesthetics, but you can't always change the layout. So especially in the suburbs, a lot of homes are cookie cutter, a lot of homes are replicas of one another in terms of the floor plan. But this one I found had a really unique floor plan. It's an end unit townhome. There are some really lovely ceilings. We have lovely skylights. There are a few different level changes, and I found all of that really exciting and accommodating to the way that we live our lives in a home and the way that I wanted to decorate the home. So when I came in, it was like totally a blank slate, and I love that also. And I knew kind of right away what some of the primary changes that I would make to the home were, namely door levers, light fixtures, and then layering on from there in my own DIY and renter-friendly aesthetic. There are also a lot of heirlooms and hand-me-downs from my family and my mother and different aunts. Most of my artwork is made from family. I have really a set of prolific aunts in my life, artistically prolific aunts and family members in my life. So it's a mixture of art that they've produced, art that I've been inspired to create, as well as hand-me-down. Some of these textiles are vintage. They go back 50, 60 years and more. And then the newer textiles that I've created. So welcome to my living room. This is right off of the foyer and also one of the first places that you see when you walk into my home. So I wanted to make it a very welcoming and warm space off the bat. This is how we're living. This is what you're walking into. So I've somewhat replicated this vignette from my previous home. That's also one of my renter hacks. You don't have to start completely from scratch. You can really somewhat copy and paste different aspects or vignettes of your previous home into the space that you're moving into if you have a similar palette or space that you can make that transition onto. So in this case, this is a console that I got from Article during the pandemic. We did some partnership work together, and the reason that I love it beyond what it looks like and fits my aesthetic is that it allows me to store all kinds of stuff in here. So I have candles in here. I think I have just miscellaneous artwork. I'm often switching out and updating artwork throughout my home. There are board games in another one. So you can really just tuck away all of your kind of everyday or seasonal things in a space and set it and forget it, but then have it look good. So this is large. It accommodates all of our little knickknacks. I think we store batteries and batteries and light bulbs in another. So it really works well for that purpose. And then I accented it with this Sinufu stool. And this is made in Ivory Coast by Abu, who is in my book. He's a wood sculptor in Ivory Coast. And I got a few different pieces from him during the course of our interview phase for the book research. This is a piece of Kuba cloth. Kuba cloth is made in DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo. And I actually got this piece in Marrakesh during my book research in June of 2022. Although I do not know who the artisan is, but I did buy it from an artisan vendor in the market. And again, Kuba cloth is featured in my book. These are pieces that I've also wanted to explore more and learn more about. So in my book, I do have an entire section dedicated to the production of Kuba cloth and profiling experts who produce this in DRC. And then you have my book. I keep referencing my book, The African Decor Edit. And I wanted to be able to honor it in a special way beyond putting it kind of on just a prop, something that could prop it up, or laying it around on a book table, on a coffee table, which is still adequate. But I splurged and bought this beautiful book stand by Virginia Sin, and it allows me to prop the book up. I can open it to a page or various pages. And the photography in the book is also its very own special moment. So when I open it up, I also feel like I'm displaying photography in my home. So that is the dedicated space for my book, The African Decor Edit. And then if we come up over here, again, another piece that I got on the road during my book research. This is a large blanket. If I open it up, it's massive, so I'll keep it folded for now. And this is from Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, in the textile designated area of the capital called Shiromeda. And that is also where I conducted my book research for a specific section on Ethiopian textiles. And this pillow is one of my newer experiments in items. This is indigo from Mali. And this is Baule from Ivory Coast, from Cote d'Ivoire. And again, the artisans who create this textile are featured in my book as well. So we get to understand how they produce it, where the cotton comes from, the weaving technique, etc. And so this is a combination of both of those styles. And last but not least, on this corner of the living room, we have a feathered juju hat. What's really exciting about these is that they are actually hats. So they're worn like this. They come from Cameroon, from Western Cameroon, and they're worn with an entire beautiful ensemble during special ceremonies there. And if we swing over to what I like to call my library, but it's just a wall of books, many of which, I've been collecting over years from, high school. Many of them are from college, some are from grad school work. But my most recent and I think most cherished possessions are books that were written by friends and other designers and cookbook authors who I've gotten to know just over the past, 5 to 10 years, and especially during the period of me studying, how books are made and really dissecting and wanting to know more about how this all comes together. So that's essentially what I have showcased here. This is also a calabash from, I believe this is from Ghana. I took this from my brother, Lamine, many years ago. It's actually from Ghana or Brazil. I know those are very different places you would think, but there is a significant symbiosis between the two, given the transatlantic slave trade, and he has spent significant periods of time in both places. This was actually a pulley that is used during weaving, and this originates in Liberia. I bought this in Ghana at the same time I bought the Dogon Mali window shutter. And what I love so much about this piece and what the vendor told me at the time is that in those days, these faces were carved in a way that reflected and resembled the physical features and the facial features of certain tribes from throughout West Africa and pre-colonial West Africa in particular. So these were utilized as passports. You would carry this with you if you were going into another region or going into another kingdom, and you would show them this and they would know where you came from. This would validate and confirm what your origin is, and then you would be allowed entry into that region. And I also love that it's Liberian because my eldest brother, Craig, is half Liberian. So this is also, pays homage to that side of my family as well. So this is one of the pieces that I mentioned is produced by one of my aunts. This is made by my aunt Renee C. Neblet. She is based in Ghana, in Kokrobite, and she's also featured extensively throughout my book. She has a beautiful home there, as well as an art institute called the Kokrobite Institute. But she produced this piece of art called Everybody is Talking. I actually don't know the year, but I'm assuming it was the 70s or the 80s when she was really focused on this artistic style. And so this is a piece that she gave to my mother and my mother gave to me. It's also beautifully matted and framed, and it belongs to me now. This is my somewhat new to me coffee table. It was a Facebook Marketplace find, and I got it a few months before my book came out. I figured I have a coffee table book coming out. I should probably get a coffee table. I originally got rid of our coffee table when my son was learning how to walk, which was almost 15 years ago, and just hadn't gotten around to getting another one. So I really love this. It kind of goes with the vintage, modern aesthetic of my home. And I love that it's clear, so it doesn't obstruct visual space, and you can still see my prized Moroccan rug beneath it. This is the rug that I got in Morocco in 2022. And so on the table, we have, again, various books from friends. This is by my friend Michael July. We were friends in Brooklyn. I think he's in Atlanta now. Feels, looking back now, kind of like a yearbook of Brooklyn. I have so many friends who are featured in the book. That was from the mid 2005 or so region, and it really captures a moment in time from when I was living in Brooklyn. And this is a classic, a true classic that my mother passed down to my son and I. We both have dreads, and it just shows the beauty and diversity of having dreadlocks. And this is also for my mother. This is an Ndop stool, a miniature stool from Nigeria. And if you notice, it's a little bit wobbly, and I always tell customers and clients who are asking and inquiring about, authenticity of different African-made products and objects. And there's always going to be a variation in an artisan and in a handmade object, and that's really what brings it to life and distinguishes it from something that's mass-produced or machine-made. And so, it's not even, and that's what I love about it. And if it's really that serious, you can prop something up underneath, which I have had to do with another stool that I utilize in a more utilitarian purpose, but visually, I love that it's a bit quirky. So in terms of the visual aesthetic, I kind of mix it up depending on the room. This is a larger home, and I didn't feel wed to or committed to needing the home to be completely visually homogeneous or the same. So when you walk into my living room, it's a little bit more neutral. That's by virtue of my sofa. I love leather. I love natural materials. I got a few really great rugs when I was in Morocco on my book research in 2022. And I waited a very long time for my son to get old enough for us to be able to have a light colored rug. So I got the most ivory rug I could find in the market in Marrakesh. So that is the centerpiece of our living room, and the neutral tones unfold from there. And I do accent that with bright artwork. That's really one of my design staples when I'm working in a neutral space or when I'm in a neutral mood. I still incorporate moments and bursts of color through artwork and home decor accents, so namely pillows and other textiles. this is my entry. We are a few steps up from the front door, and one of the first things that greets you when you come into my home is a very strategically placed wood carved chest that my mother gave me, that she obtained close to 30 years ago or so when she was managing the African Art Gallery in Georgetown, Washington, D.C. It's sculpted by a famous wood carver called Lamidi Fakei, and he is a renowned sculptor from Nigeria, and specifically from the Yoruba tribe in Nigeria. And these are very traditional Yoruba carvings. You can see some of the motifs here that actually carry out throughout various other textiles and African art and objects. It's one of the most popular designs that you'll find, and the specific features and features on the objects and the subjects within the chest are very specific to this style of Yoruban art carving and wood carving. So this is a piece from my mother, and it holds a lot of familial value for that reason. It's been in the family for quite some time. And then to my left here, I have a carving from Mali, from the Dogon region of Mali. And this was not a hand-me-down. This was a piece that I got when I was doing my book travels and research in Ghana in March of 2023. And this is from an artisan market in Ghana. And these are actually, they come in different sizes. This is one of the smaller sizes that I could fit in my suitcase. And this was a door shutter, and they're used on homes and granaries in the Dogon region of Mali. And so this is also a hand-carved object, and it showcases people from that area doing, different daily activities. There's also local animal life that you see here. There's an alligator, and this is the very cool shutter lever. So there are several different elements on that I really wanted to be able to bring back. The doors are probably, larger than our standard door, super beautiful, very heavy, and unfortunately there's no way that I could bring them back here. So this is a memento and a nod to that wood carving tradition from Mali, West Africa as well. So here just below the Dogon shutter, we have a collection, kind of a motley collection of different objects and art that I picked up along the way. This is a vintage kind of antique vase from a secondhand shop, and I'd love to have a moment of a fresh flower here. This flower, actually both of these, eucalyptus and this one, I don't know the name. I got them last week in Los Angeles. I was there for my book tour, and I did a flower run in central LA, and I've had this habit of trying to preserve my book tour flowers for as long as possible. Some of them I've been able to dry, and they're also around the home, but these are still relatively fresh. I was in Los Angeles a week ago, so they're still going strong, and I want to be able to display them for as long as possible, and they will always remind me of my book tour. This is a watercolor / drawing that my cousin actually got custom made for me. It's from a photograph taken the night of my New York launch, which was on October 1st. And that was in Soho, Manhattan. And this was right after the event concluded, and we went out to get some fun shots in the street. And it was a whirly dress, kind of a flapper style dress made by Andrea Iyama, and I partnered with Industry Africa for my clothing and jewelry for my New York launch. And so this also captures that moment from my book tour. This is a postcard from one of my favorite restaurants in Brooklyn, in Williamsburg. It's called Colette. And this is another postcard that I got when I was in Paris a few summers ago. And I don't really know the story. I'd never seen this painting before, this drawing before, but I went into the gift shop, and there were very few objects and souvenirs that reflected Black people and Black art in the gift shop, and even more largely throughout the Louvre. And yeah, so I bought this. I pretty much bought everything that I could find that had a Black person on it. because I wanted to, represent and show that these objects are in demand. This art is in demand, and I found the artwork beautiful. So I wanted to place it in a very prominent place in my home. And then this is a soapstone sculpture from Uganda, and these are available in my web shop, XN Studio, and I call it tulinawe. And tulinawe is the Luganda word for together. And so it's a continuous sculpted piece, and to me that represents togetherness. So I dubbed it tulinawe in honor of what it looks like aesthetically, and also to be able to incorporate some of the Luganda language into my products. The powder room, there are a few updates that I made here. First and foremost, the door lever. All of the door levers in my home initially were doorknobs, like the brassy kind of doorknobs that come pretty standard in 1990s townhomes. And so the updates that I made in here were, I had remnants of this wallpaper that I've had for probably close to 8 years. And these were leftovers after I installed wallpaper in the foyer of my previous home. And obviously, the seams don't match, but I think that adds to the quirky nature of it. You don't always, if you have remnants, I would much rather do this and utilize something that has a special meaning to me, that I still like visually. And it was a small space and a fun space. So I figured, there could be worse things than seams that don't match. So I think that's actually a bit of decor advice from me to you. Don't be afraid to install mismatched seams wallpaper. And beyond that, I've also utilized this indigo textile from Mali as a hand towel, and it's super absorbent. I actually have these at various places throughout my home. I use them as towels when I travel because they roll up very small and they are super absorbent. So they're easy to travel with. I take them with me when I travel. I use them in my home as hand towels. I take them to the beach. You'll probably always find me with one in some capacity. And then the other small update that I made in here is switching out the faucet fixture. That was a super easy update as well. I did that on my own DIY. And that's the powder room. The best compliment that somebody could give me about my home, and that I often get about my home, is that it feels very warm in here. The other day, there was somebody from a utility company, and he came in and he was like, "Whoa, this feels really warm. Like, are you a designer?" You must. And I was like, "Yeah, I am. I am a designer." But to hear that from complete strangers, and I know that this is actually not his aesthetic, but there was still something about it that felt warm and familiar to him. And I think that's what textiles can do. That's what art can do. That's what photos of family can do. So regardless of your background or where you come from or what your actual aesthetic preference is, there are common elements that signal this is a home. Somebody has taken time to put this together to curate a space that is welcoming. So that's really the best compliment I could receive and do receive when I have friends and family and utility guys over my home. I don't know if so much that I have a design mantra, but the mantra and the tagline behind XN Studio is lifestyle without borders. And so that's the way I think about my design. That's really what my design indicates and signals to me, because I've noticed different aesthetics, different patterns that are present and are popular and have existed in various parts of the culture, either independently or somewhat intertwined for centuries. And so design doesn't respect borders. Design doesn't adhere to borders. Design does not know borders. And I think that there's something inherently beautiful about that dialogue that is supra, a geopolitical construct. And that is also why I design, and that's also what inspires me to create and to work with people across borders. So So welcome to my dining room area, dining room transitional area. On the left here, we have a painting that I created. So this piece was inspired by a painting that I saw in the background of Lawrence's apartment in Insecure. And it was a slightly smaller painting. It was more vertically oriented, but I looked at it, I loved it. I remember like taking, pictures of the painting on the television, and then running out to get all of the materials to get the canvas. And I believe I already had the paint. And this was the piece that I produced from it. And I'm constantly getting inquiries when people see it like on social media or something, but I don't actually fashion myself as a painter. So I have not made them available beyond my own private collection at home, but I love that it reminds me of that TV show, Insecure, and how you can also find inspiration and creative inspiration around you all the time, including on television. So swinging around to one of the nooks in my dining room, this is an area where I've actually sat here, similar to the mudcloth butterfly chair in my living room. This is an indigo butterfly chair, and it's a really comfortable place at times when I've had really, hectic work days. I often work at my dining room table, so sitting here kind of lets me release a little bit. I might have a small table on the side, and I'm just like writing some emails from here, and it really creates a nice transition space from what my dining room has become, which is my office. Although I have an office, but there's something about working at the dining table. These are also a collection of pieces. Again, another Bolga fan. This one I got at an international African Arts Festival in Brooklyn, probably a decade or so ago. I don't remember exactly. These are photographs that I took of. This is the Gaddafi Mosque in Kampala, which is just outside of my aunt's apartment in Kampala, in Old Kampala. And this is some of the beautiful breeze block in her apartment building that I found really gorgeous. And I actually took those photos in, I believe, 2007 when I was in Uganda doing thesis research for my graduate thesis. This is a picture that a painting that my son made when he was in 2nd or 3rd grade, and it was selected to be on display in the mall, and we're all very proud of it. It was made from etched in styrofoam and rolling on different paint colors. So there's a purple one too somewhere as well. This is a hat, I believe also from Mali, that I somewhat borrowed 16 years ago from a family member who was moving from Brooklyn to Oakland, and my son was a toddler then, and they put the hat on his head and sent me a picture. I was at work and I was like, oh my gosh, we have to keep that. That is super cute on him. And so I've integrated it into my decor as well. And so as you can see here, I love mixing objects with paintings and art and pictures on a gallery wall. Gallery walls don't just have to be a uniform picture, painting. You can really mix it up by adding different objects in addition to switching up the orientation. This gallery wall starts low, or it stretches more vertically than it does horizontally. And this was the first time that I did this, and that's really just what the space dictated to me. I didn't know really what to do with the space at first. Was I gonna put something big here? But this was the first piece that I put up and just built out from there based on things that I was finding. So it has developed very organically. And here we have an Ethiopian Coptic cross that was gifted to me by a family member who visited in 2011 or so. So this has also been in the family for some time. We have another wood carved piece from the same Yoruba artist who carved the chest in the front. And this serves, as you can see here, as an elevated plant stand. I really revere my plants. I know that, there are maybe other, better, more prestigious ways of showcasing this artisan and this sculptor's work, but my plants mean everything to me. So this is not a downgrade. I also have photographs and works here by friends, and also images, pictures that I took myself over the years. This was a beautiful block in Brooklyn where I used to live, and I snapped this picture in 2013. I just loved the juxtaposition of the different bright colored doors and then the bicycle outside. It all felt very Brooklyn to me. So I wanted to frame that to remember that portion of my life spent in Brooklyn. This is a picture from Cameroon. Actually snapped this in the car, driving by really quickly, and saw this beautiful gaggle of school children headed home from school one day, and just really loved that scene and wanted to also keep that and incorporate that once I got back home. So this is my dining room table, AKA my desk. I work here a lot, and it was one of the first spaces that I had mocked up in Photoshop before moving in. I knew that this was exactly the space that this table was gonna go. I knew that I wanted to change out the light fixture immediately, and I knew that I wanted to add a ceiling medallion. So those were some of the first things that I did when I moved into the home and really created the dining room table as a focal point, really just, extending from this update in DIY as well. And this is a mudcloth table runner here. Again, mudcloth is from Mali, West Africa. And I pointed the table with different upholstery as well. So this is also a mudcloth piece. This is a piece from my mother. It was part of a much larger piece and is actually still a lot more at her home, but I snagged a few pieces to upholster these Cheska chairs. And this is again a Kuba cloth. This is another form, a low cut pile Kuba cloth from the same style that I have hanging above my media console in the living room. And this is just a different variety of that. So I use that to accent my these other chairs in the dining room. So one of the best things about African textiles, again, is that they go with so many different styles and patterns. And one great example is the fact that I then, on my kitchen island, have this very frilly lace kind of cafe curtain, DIY cafe curtain, that I was inspired to create after, again, my visit to Paris. And what I love so much about Parisian decor is that it does blend and mix between these two traditional styles. This is traditional Parisian and this is traditional Congolese, but again, they work together because they're steeped in some larger and more traditional meaning. And so what inspired me also from a utilitarian standpoint to put some visual block here is coming down the stairs and seeing this, without any obstruction. You just see all of my junk under the kitchen island. And so I was trying to figure out, how can I hide this in an aesthetically pleasing way? And I was at IKEA and stumbled upon these really cool, this is actually a pot rail, and the size ended up perfect. So this is an IKEA island. I got it off of Facebook Marketplace, and then I went to IKEA and bought these pot rails, and I already had this lace curtain that I utilized in one of my closets in my previous home, and I cut it in half and had enough to use around the entire island. So it creates this really fun kind of Parisian cafe moment in my otherwise very modern African home aesthetic. And again, alluding to the different ways that I spruced up the home. When I installed this peel and stick brick wallpaper, I remember as soon as it was done and I stepped back, I felt so good because it really grounded the space, which prior to installing it felt very kind of voluminous to me and felt overwhelming. And I didn't install this until I think July or August. So I'd already been in the home for some time. But again, I wanted to take my time to really figure out what worked for me here. And I did the whole Photoshop thing, and look good on Photoshop, but you don't always know what it will look like in person. So I was really pleased with how this turned out. And every now and again, somebody can tell, but they're like, it's fine. It's fine that it's not real. Those are mostly my Brooklyn friends who have real brick in their homes. But for those of us who don't have that, we're none the wiser, and it's convincing. So over here we have a music station, which can somewhat be misleading because none of us in the home are actually musicians. My son is a great musician, but he didn't really like stick toward the piano. He's also really great at the drums. But this was a keyboard that my father passed down to my son. And whenever I host, actually, when I'm hosting gatherings and my family is here, my dad, who's an amazing pianist, he assumes his position and provides entertainment and music for the evening. So I keep this here for him. And then we also have a piano bench, which I created, which I designed. It's a mixture, again, between this modern aesthetic and mud cloth, and I use more industrial feel, these legs for the bench as well. So it's a combination of modern and traditional, and then bringing them together for a utilitarian purpose at our music station. And above said music station, another piece by my aunt Renee Neblett. This one is called A Tear for Biko, and she produced this in 1984. And Stephen Biko was an anti-apartheid activist in South Africa who was killed and sacrificed his life for the movement and the anti-apartheid movement and liberation in the 80s. So this is also a very important piece, both in terms of its significance and also visually. The kitchen is very stark to me, and it was a newly renovated kitchen when I moved in. If I were renovating it, I would do something a bit different, but it's beautifully done, it's well done, but it's not so much visually to my liking. And I wanted, again, to make it warmer, to ground the aesthetic, ground the visual experience in the kitchen. So I did that by adding an apron and having that on display rather than tucking it away. I have this vintage Persian rug that my mother gave me, and also utilizing, I removed one of the cabinet doors here and created an open shelving concept, an open shelving space, which also brought down some of the visual monotony of having just this blank wall of white cabinets and gray subway tiles. So in it, I've added special pieces. These are coffee mugs from my friend Zelika's wedding many years ago. These are traditional Buna coffee cups, and then some other important stemware and meaningful stemware and glassware. One of my best friends' cookbooks by Hawa Hassan in BB's Kitchen. She's a James Beard Award winner. And then also another variety of cookbooks by friends as well. My friend Keanu, and then Alexander Smalls and Nina Duro. These are both new books, cookbooks that came out. Add them to your guest list or your gifting list for this holiday season and thank me later. So my career path, it was/is a bit meandering. I've always been surrounded by eclectic, creative women and men, but in particular the women in my life, starting with my mother and the group of aunties that raised me and raised me and my brothers together in Washington, D.C. area, and also a little bit in Europe. My parents met in Germany, and so they relocated to the Washington, D.C. area because my father got into Howard University Medical School, and so they left Germany and set up a new life here. And my parents are both entrepreneurial. Like I said, my father studied medicine, but he went on to establish his own medical clinic, family practice. And he started that from the ground up and ran that himself for the greater part of my life. And my mother worked in promoting African art, artists, and fashion here in the Washington, D.C. area, plugging primarily into the ambassador groups that live here and the women and the wives of ambassadors and female ambassadors, and using that as a channel to gain further exposure for African artists who were coming here for the first time or trying to really get a foothold in the African market. And so, you know, me as a little kid going to fashion shows with my mother, going to expos and expositions with my mother in Washington, D.C. at the convention center. That was how I grew up. If there was, a day where school was closed for whatever reason, I would be at the African Art Gallery in Georgetown, Washington, D.C. that she managed, which is also where and how I came across and now have a lot of the art in my home. There are pieces that she collected during that time frame, which now have been passed on to me. And that was really kind of what I grew up around and established as the baseline of what's normal. Women and my family members creating their own way where there wasn't a way, or where there was not exactly an idea or a concept or an opportunity that fit what their ambitions. They created that way. They created that path and blazed a trail for the likes of me. And so fast forward many, many years, I got into architecture. I pursued architecture and art history in school, pivoted a little bit to human rights and social justice through my urban planning studies in graduate school at Columbia, and then worked in human rights for many years, human rights and social justice philanthropy for many years after that in New York City, all the while really missing my creative outlet. So once I got an opportunity to decide what I wanted to do for myself, I pursued human rights, and I actually realized a few years into that career that there is and can be a bridge between the arts, culture, and social justice and human rights. So XN Studio is a home decor brand, but it is also an advocacy tool and an incubator for economic development, women's empowerment, and cultural and historic preservation of African culture and art and histories throughout the continent of Africa. So the most recent and ambitious project that I've taken on in that, 13-year time span, I founded XN Studio in 2011. And a few weeks ago, last month, I published my first book that really encapsulates the essence of what XN Studio has pursued in terms of storytelling and profiling the lives of artisans throughout Africa through the lens of the work that they produce, through the lens of their textiles, through the lens of their wooden sculptures, etc. And in that project, I interview 16 artisans throughout 9 countries in Africa, and then showcase 10 homes ranging from Los Angeles to Berlin to Accra that demonstrate in elevated and meaningful ways and creative ways of incorporating African decor into various lifestyles and homes. So come with me now upstairs. I will take you to my bedroom. Welcome to my primary bedroom, my primary suite, as I like to call it. This is where a lot more layering action happens with textiles and baskets and a new fun light fixture that is a new addition to my collection for XN Studio, and pretty much inspired by, again, my book research. I worked a lot and researched a lot of objects created and made by raffia. And I just went crazy with it when I got home and started looking around to see, well, what can I design with this myself? I was really inspired by the artisan stories and creations while I was on the road in a way that I hadn't necessarily been when I was a little bit more removed from the production. So this is one of my favorite things ever, especially given my very high ceiling. My cathedral ceiling here had really been trying to figure out how to, again, ground the space. I like cozy, small spaces. And so this light fixture really achieves that, helps me achieve, again, a warmer space, a more grounded space, and it makes the space feel less humongous to me. This is another Ashoke textile, and this was given to me by my best friend, whose mother-in-law gave it to her directly from Nigeria. Her mother-in-law is Yoruba, and that again, those are the people who specialize in this type of textile. So her mother-in-law knows that I love African textiles, and so she gave this to my best friend to then give to me. And this is folded in half. It's also a very large textile, so it serves as a really lovely and stylish coverlet as well. And here I've added a mixture of mud cloth. Well, this is mud cloth, again with my favorite raffia. This is an indigo pillow that I've had for, again, 10 or 15 years. And this is a batik pillow, and I also share and go into depth on this process in the book as well, with a batik artisan named Angie in Ghana. And she's actually the one who taught me how to batik during an artist residency there in 2018. These are all baskets from Zambia. These are Tonga baskets, and I got these baskets again during my book research and travels, and there is a Tonga basket artisan in the book as well. And this really beautiful brass lamp is from my mother. I believe she got it at the Georgetown Flea. So this is probably 30 years old, probably at least 30 years old. So in this nook here, we have, again, another juju hat from Cameroon, and also a new wallpaper that I've added to the collection called the Sheena wallpaper. And it is inspired by a Kuba cloth design. And so these are traditional motifs and designs that derive from this specific textile tradition. And I was able to adapt that into a wallpaper format. And again, this wall took me a while to figure out what I wanted to do with aesthetically. I tried various different wallpapers in Photoshop. And ultimately, when I designed this for the new collection and rendered it in Photoshop, it like transformed the space instantly and took my breath away. So I'm super happy with how it turned out. I'm glad that I waited. And yeah, this is inspired by Kuba cloth as well. And then down here, these are some more textiles from my mother. This is a mud cloth as well. And this is a newer design, a newer style. This is not from my mother, but this was one that she was gifted and she ultimately gifted me. And so I use it just to spruce up this corner as well. And then a couple points over here as well. This is a Senegalese basket where I'm able to store blankets and pillows when they're in or out of season. And I got this at the Brooklyn Flea many years ago. And then over here, again, utilizing beautiful wood sculpted African furniture and objects as plant stands. And so this is a Bamileke stool from Cameroon. And again, I was able to interview the artisan who makes that. His name is Honoré, and he's in Western Cameroon. And funny story, I mean, you look at the size here, and somehow I was able to fit it in my suitcase. Coming back, in addition to like 12 shields, I don't know how we managed to do that, but by the time me and 5 grown adults were sitting and maneuvering with my luggage, we were all sweating, but we got the stool to fit into my luggage. So that's the funny story behind that. So this is one of 3 rugs that I brought back from Morocco. Unlike the Bamileke stool, which I crammed into my luggage, I had the sense to ship these back from Morocco. So I worked with the vendor and we bundled them up and shipped them via DHL. And it gave me something to look forward to coming home from. I definitely didn't want to leave my travels. I had a spectacular 2.5 months in Africa for the research, but I was excited to come home to my Moroccan rugs, and this was one of them. And it works perfectly in my bedroom. I tried it out in the living room for a while, but again, I really wanted to have that ivory moment in the living room. So I saved this piece for my bedroom. So my primary bathroom has been one of the biggest challenges and most rewarding spaces in the home so far. It was a completely blank white slate when I moved in, and again, in wanting to ground the various spaces in the home, I really had to sit and brainstorm on this space for a while. There's a massive skylight which floods the bathroom with light in addition to the cathedral ceiling. So it's a very large space. So trying to figure out what I could do here that wasn't a full renovation and that was renter friendly was really a challenge. And the first thing that I did, obviously, was layer the space with some of my textiles and baskets. So these are 2 Ugandan baskets that are also in my collection and made by artisans in the book, made by raffia. You know, I love raffia. And so this was a moment also in a vignette that I borrowed from my previous home. And I spoke to the wood-like wallpaper, and this is it. This is not real wood. I know it's hard to believe, but again, experimented with several different wallpapers on this wall through Photoshop, thankfully, and it took me a while to actually realize or to think about adding the wallpaper in a wood-like design here on this wall. But as soon as I did it, I was like, this is the wallpaper. This is the one. So this is, again, going all the way up. It makes it feel, it grounds and warms up the space in a way that I wasn't able to achieve by just leaving it blank. And it's also very much in keeping with my minimalist aesthetic. And then if we zoom down to the floors quickly, this is really what ultimately transformed after all was said and done. I still needed to and felt like I needed to do something with the floor. And this was the one piece that actually is not so renter friendly because these are peel and stick, but they are permanent. They're not gonna come up without leaving the adhesive. So I rendered the space very beautifully in Photoshop and emailed my landlord and I was like, pretty please, can I do this? And he already knows that I'm a designer. So I think he was just like waiting for the day to come. And he loved the idea, he loved the concept, and he gave me the green light. So as soon as I did this, again, very much inspired by my Parisian mixture and hodgepodge of design and travels, this really made the space pop, and it really elevated the space into a sophisticated bathroom and like spa-like experience, if you will. So this was the last design element that I added to the bathroom, and it really changed it for me, and I love spending time in here now. I do source a lot of my objects, again, from vintage spaces, from flea markets. And this is a piece from one of my textile vendors. His name is Diop, and he sets up at the Chelsea market, I think every Saturday and Sunday. He's still working there. And this piece is, again, about 10 years old. And these are made in Ghana, and they're used as kind of like billboards or advertisements for barbershops and hair salons. And there's a whole, prolific tradition behind these, which are painted on wood. So they're really beautiful, and I was finally able to save my money and get my hands on one some years ago. So I have, very special pieces, and another piece of advice that I have for anybody looking to decorate their home with special pieces that you're purchasing is sometimes you do have to save money for it. Really quality and meaningful work is not always going to come at a cheap price, but when I have my mind set on something and my visual eye set on something, I know that I'm going to just begin kind of creating a little fund. So that was even the same for my first juju hat, who I also got from Diop in Chelsea Market. And it was only $150, but at that time, that was a lot of money for me. So it probably took me like a year to save up the money because I was also saving up money to buy a home. But when I purchased the home, I had my little fund for my juju hat, and I let Diop know. And it made it even that much more special for me. So there's, again, a mixture of artwork that I've purchased from others, that I've saved my money for, and artwork that I create as a not artist. This black and gold diptych was originally a triptych. There's a piece in the center, and it was above my dining room and my old home, but I've used it at various points. I've used it in gallery walls and flanking different gallery walls. I don't actually remember or know what I did with the centerpiece, but in the meantime, it acts kind of as an interior shutter. It gives like a shutter experience. And this was a piece that I made going into one of my birthdays, where I wanted to create. I was in a very, again, artistically creative space. So That's gold spray paint and black paint, and I freehanded the whole thing. So that was a fun piece. And then this is a combination of the batik, which you saw on my pillow, on one of the pillows on my bed. And then I love cobalt blue, so I added, or like Frida Kahlo blue. So I added really into as many elements and design as I can. I also do a fun flower pot or planter with that same color, and adobe. I love the combination of primary bold colors and neutral colors. So this brings those two aesthetics together. So believe it or not, this vanity was also stark white, stark creamy white when I moved in. And this started out as leftover wallpaper from my son's bedroom, who wanted an all black room, and his room in our previous home was all black. So I wanted to bring that in for him so that he could also feel like this was his home as well. So this was leftover. I was grappling with what to do with this vanity. It was all white cream, and there were, it was kind of peeling. It wasn't in good condition. So I tried out the peel and stick on here, and it's thin enough as to where I was able to wrap it around the door. So if you think about, wrapping a box for a gift or something, that was my approach to the door, and to the vanity. So it took about, I don't know, maybe half a day or so. And this was one of the first achievements in, again, grounding the space. It draws the eye down, and it makes the space feel cozier and warmer. And so this gives us another uncanny DIY in the primary bathroom. The word home to me means refuge and respite. There's nothing that I love more than coming home after a long trip and just plopping down on my sofa, or having coffee at my kitchen island. I really just love to feel embraced here and to feel like this is the safe space for me and my son that I've worked really hard to create. And that's what home means to me, is refuge and safety. Homeworthy, it's been real. I've had a lot of fun having you over today, but I've got to get to work, so you don't got to go home, but you got to get out of here. See you next time. Bye.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to go to homeworthy.com for exclusive content, shopping guides, and so much more.